Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're gonna get into a fight.
A street fight, specifically.
Right, metaphorically speaking, of course. But we are gonna talk about the difference between looking like you can fight and, actually being able to fight.
It's a huge distinction.
It really is. We're tackling a set of ideas from our source material today that completely upends how we think about education, intelligence, and
And success in general, really.
exactly. The source essentially accuses modern society of confusing the map with the territory. We're looking at why we're training people to be very good at things that don't actually matter in the real world, while at the same time completely neglecting the chaotic, messy skills that actually lead to survival.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look at how we build what the author calls domain-specific competence.
So the source material today centers on this concept of a lesson in disorder, and it starts with this incredibly striking image. I want you, the listener, to picture a bodybuilder.
Right, the classic gym rat.
Exactly. As someone who spends hours in the gym, they're using those really expensive, high-tech machines. They've got perfectly sculpted muscles. They just look terrifyingly strong.
They look like the absolute pinnacle of fitness, like they could walk straight through a brick wall.
Right. But then the source compares this bodybuilder to someone who's actually been trained in a street fight, or someone who's had to lift heavy, irregular stones out in nature.
And the argument is pretty brutal.
It is. The argument is that in a disorderly, chaotic, real-world situation like a street fight, the bodybuilder gets hammered.
Completely hammered. And I mean, it seems so counterintuitive at first, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you look at the size, you look at the muscle definition, and you just assume capacity.
Right, you assume utility. But the source is making a very specific point about domain dependence. The bodybuilder's strength is strictly domain-specific. It only applies to the machine. It applies to a highly controlled environment where the weight moves on this fixed track, The friction is calculated, the range of motion is entirely predetermined.
It's artificial. It's a simulation of work, not actual work.
It's completely artificial.
Yeah.
And the minute you introduce the chaos of reality, like someone actively trying to hit you from an unpredictable angle or a stone that's slippery and uneven and asymmetrical, that gym strength just doesn't transfer.
Right.
The bodybuilder might actually tear a muscle trying to lift that stone because the stabilizing muscles, the tiny ones used in messy situations, they were never trained by the machine.
That's such a crucial point. The machine stabilizes the weight so your body doesn't have to.
Exactly.
And because your body doesn't have to, those little micromuscles that handle balance and quick adjustments, they just atrophy.
Yeah.
You look big, but you're actually structurally fragile.
Precisely. And this right here is the hook for our entire deep dive today, because the source argues that school, universities, our entire modern concept of structured learning, that is the gym machine.
Wow.
And life. Life is the street fight.
That's a genuinely terrifying analogy if you really sit with it.
It's the core tension of the whole text. We assume that training, whether that's sitting in a classroom or memorizing formulas or rigidly following a curriculum, we assume that prepares us for reality.
We think we're building strength.
But the source argues this is a dangerous illusion. We're just building gym muscles. We're becoming absolute experts in a fake, structured environment. And by doing that, we're actually becoming more fragile when we step out into the real world.
We're basically training for a game that doesn't exist outside the classroom walls.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to really unpack this. We're going to explore why we actually need disorder to truly learn, why school might literally be making us less capable, less practical.
And we'll look at this fascinating character type the source introduces called the flaneur.
Right, and how to become a person of knowledge rather than just a swallower of curriculum.
It's essentially a complete deconstruction of what it means to be a smart person. It asks a really uncomfortable question. Are you actually smart, or are you just obedient to the rules of a highly specific game?
So let's get into the definitions, because the source draws a really hard line between two distinct worlds, two domains. And understanding this distinction is kind of the key to everything else we're going to talk about.
Yes. On one side, you have what the source calls the ludic domain.
Ludic, right?
Yeah, from the Latin word ludus, which means game. Think of blackjack at a casino, or think of chess, or even a standardized test in high school.
So what exactly characterizes the ludic domain? Like, what makes a game in this context?
The rules are explicit. They are fully supplied in advance. You know exactly what all the variables are.
Okay.
So in a casino, you know how many cards are in the deck. The dealer has to hit on 16 and stand on 17. In a classroom, you know exactly what chapters are going to be on the final exam. It's a completely closed system.
It's crisp, it's clean, it's almost fair in a way.
It is fair because the boundaries are totally visible.
Yeah.
But now contrast that with the ecological domain.
Which is real life.
Right. This is the messy reality. This is the street. This is the global marketplace. This is trying to manage a romantic relationship. In the ecological domain, you do not know the rules.
You don't even know what game you're playing half the time.
Exactly. In fact, the rules might literally change while you're playing. You cannot isolate the variables. It's incredibly messy, it's ambiguous, and nothing is supplied in advance.
And the big mistake we make, the trap the source says we all fall into, is assuming that if we get really good at the ludic stuff, the games, the classroom logic, that it automatically translates to the ecological stuff.
That is the big illusion, the transfer delusion. We think, oh, he's a master at chess, so he must be a brilliant strategist in business or war. Or she got straight A's in advanced economics, so she's going to be a phenomenal investor.
And the source is incredibly skeptical of this.
Highly skeptical. It argues vehemently that skills acquired in the ludic domain, the gym, do not transfer to the ecological domain.
The source actually mentions chess specifically here, and I think this is going to hurt some feelings because culturally we really revere chess players as these towering intellects.
We do.
But the source points out there is actually no evidence, none at all, that chess skills transfer to real-life reasoning.
It's a bitter pill for chess enthusiasts, but the psychological research backs it up. You can have grandmasters who can literally visualize the board, blindfolded, right? They can play 20 games simultaneously.
Which is mind-blowing.
It's an incredible feat of memory and processing, but only within that specific 64-square grid. If you ask that same grandmaster to remember a sequence of random events outside the chessboard, or solve a complex interpersonal conflict at work, or navigate a sudden political crisis, they are statistically no better than an average person off the street.
Their brilliance is just locked inside the rules of the game.
Locked inside the rules. That's exactly it.
That's a really scary thought when you apply it to the education system. I mean, we spend nearly 2 decades of our lives in school, from kindergarten all the way to PhDs for some people. Are we just getting good at school and not actually getting good at thinking?
That is precisely the implication. And look, we accept this limitation for video games, right? We know that being world-class at Mario Kart doesn't mean you can drive a Formula One car.
Right, obviously.
We know that being top-ranked in Call of Duty doesn't mean you'd survive 5 minutes in actual combat. But we stubbornly refuse to accept this logic for school. We cling to the idea that classroom skills are life skills.
But the source goes even further than just saying school is useless. It actually suggests it might be actively harmful.
Yes, and this brings us to a really crucial, slightly technical word used in the text. Iatrogenics.
Iatrogenics. Break that down for us.
It's originally a medical term. It literally means harm caused by the healer. It's what happens when the doctor actually makes you sicker, like when a surgery is successful, but it causes a secondary infection that's way worse than the original injury.
Okay, so applying that to education. Pedagogical iatrogenics. The idea that the teacher, by trying to structure your mind and help you, is actually breaking your natural reasoning.
Exactly. And it's so insidious because you don't feel it happening. You get a good grade, so you think you're learning, you think you're getting smarter, but you are actively losing your natural ecological instincts.
There's a specific experiment mentioned in the source that illustrates this perfectly. The pole counting experiment.
Oh, this is a great one.
This blew my mind because it is so simple, yet it exposes this flaw in such a raw, undeniable way. Walk us through how they set this up.
This comes from a study by researchers Laura Martignon and Birgit Ulmer. It's devastatingly simple. They took a group of children and divided them. Some of these kids had been extensively trained in arithmetic. They had been to gym class for their brains, so to speak. They knew their multiplication tables. They knew the rigid rules of math class.
And the other group?
The other group were untrained, just regular kids using their basic common sense, maybe a bit younger, or just from a less structured educational background.
Okay, so the setup is basically educated versus naive.
Right. They presented both groups of kids with a picture or a very simple scenario. You have 15 poles standing in a line, like a fence. Just 15 vertical sticks hammered into the ground.
15 poles. Got it. I can picture that.
And the question they asked was, how many intervals, meaning how many empty spaces are there between the 15 poles?
Okay, so visually, If I have 2 poles, there's 1 space between them. If I have 3 poles, there are 2 spaces. It's always 1 less than the number of poles.
Exactly. That is common sense. That is ecological thinking. You're looking at the reality of the physical objects. Now, here's the kicker. The children who were untrained in arithmetic, the ones who hadn't been rigidly taught how to process word problems, they looked at it, or just imagined it, and they correctly figured out there are 14 intervals.
They just use their eyes?
They used their eyes and their natural reasoning. They engaged directly with the territory.
And the smart kids, the ones with the arithmetic training.
They got confused.
Yeah.
A massive portion of them confidently answered 15. Wow. Because they tried to apply a map they had learned in school. They heard the number 15 in the prompt, they recognized it as a math problem, and they thought, oh, the number in the problem is 15, so the answer must be 15. Or they tried to blindly apply a multiplication rule they'd memorized.
The training actually degraded their ability to just see the reality that was right in front of them.
That is the essence of iatrogenics in the classroom. Highly structured learning can replace common sense with a rigid, inappropriate map. And when the map doesn't fit the territory, which it almost never does in the messy real world, the highly educated person crashes, while the uneducated person just naturally walks around the hole in the ground.
Because the educated kid is just trying to satisfy the teacher's rubric. But the uneducated kid is actually trying to solve the problem.
Exactly.
It completely reminds me of those news stories you hear about people who are so blindly reliant on their GPS that they literally drive their car into a lake because the screen told them to turn left.
That is the perfect modern analogy for this. The GPS is the ludic domain. It's just a model. It's a highly simplified, often outdated representation of reality. The lake is the ecological domain, the wet, muddy, car-ruining reality.
And the source argues that our schools are essentially factories for producing people who drive into lakes because they've been trained to trust the map more than the water rising around their tires.
They trust the authority of the abstract model over the undeniable evidence of their own senses.
And think about what that means for the modern workforce. You hire someone with a really fancy, expensive degree, and you hand them a messy, undefined problem.
They don't look at the problem. They look for the textbook solution.
Oh.
And when that textbook solution inevitably fails, what do? They blame reality. They say, well, the model's right. The market is just behaving irrationally.
The world is wrong. My spreadsheet is right. This moves us seamlessly into the next major theme of the source material, the touristification of life. Because this obsession with structure, with maps, with safety, it's not just isolated to school. It bleeds into how we parent, how we work, how we structure our leisure time.
It's everywhere. And here we meet what you could call the villain of the piece, at least according to a concept from biologist E.O. Wilson, which the source quotes extensively. The villain is the soccer mom.
Now, before we get a flood of angry emails, let's be really clear and unpack what they mean by soccer mom here. The source isn't attacking literal mothers, and it's not actually about the sport of soccer.
No, absolutely not. It's used as an archetype. It represents a very specific modern style of management, specifically the micromanagement of a child's life.
Right.
It represents this intense, overarching attempt to completely eliminate all trial and error from a child's existence. It's the scheduling of every single minute of their day, the constant adult supervision of every activity, the removal of all physical and emotional risk.
It's the parent who preemptively argues with the teacher about a B-, or who immediately intervenes in every minor playground dispute so the kids never have to work it out themselves.
It is the deep desire to make the child's entire life a ludic domain, perfectly controlled, perfectly safe, entirely predictable.
And E.O. Wilson argues this is a major hindrance to their actual development.
A massive hindrance. Because when you artificially remove trial and error, you remove what makes a human being anti-fragile. You stop the child from naturally learning how to handle shocks and surprises.
You stop them from developing those stabilizing muscles we talked about earlier.
Precisely. And the source describes the end result of this highly curated parenting style. It doesn't produce robust intellectuals. It produces what it calls nerds.
And the definition of nerd here is both hilarious and deeply cutting. The source defines a nerd not as someone who likes comics or science, but simply as a slower computer.
All right, think deeply about that definition. If you train a human child to only operate on pre-existing maps, do this extracurricular, then take this AP class, then get this grade, you are essentially turning them into a processor. You are programming an algorithm into them.
But a human being will always, always be a slower, less efficient processor than an actual silicon chip.
Exactly. So you are literally training them for obsolescence. You're giving them a skill set that a machine can do infinitely better and faster.
If your only real skill is following explicit rule, a computer is going to take your job.
And beyond just jobs, what happens when that mental script breaks? What happens when this human algorithm encounters a messy emotional situation it wasn't programmed for?
They freeze, they crash. It's the human equivalent of the blue screen of death.
They completely lack the capacity to handle ambiguity. And to illustrate this, the source makes this incredibly powerful comparison using lions. The difference between a lion in the wild and a lion in captivity. This is probably one of the most vivid metaphors in the entire text.
I love this analogy. Let's look at the captive lion first. Because if you just look at it on paper, by modern metrics, the captive lion has it made.
Oh, the captive lion is the ultimate success story of the soccer mom world. It lives significantly longer. It is technically richer, meaning it gets fed high-quality, perfectly butchered meat regularly at the exact same time every day.
It has perfect job security.
It has a world-class veterinarian on call 24/7. It is completely safe. It will never starve to death. It will never be horribly injured by a rival male.
It's the corporate executive.
Yeah.
It's the guy with the steady paycheck, the matched 401k, the premium health insurance, and the corner office.
Yes, but now look at the wild lion. The wild lion faces constant risk. It might go hungry for a week. It constantly has to fight to defend its territory. Statistically, it lives a much shorter life. But it possesses what the source calls existential priorities. It has true, unfiltered freedom. It is incredibly sharp. It is deeply biologically engaged with its environment in a way the captive lion never, ever can be.
The wild lion actually reads the wind.
The wild lion knows the terrain intimately. It knows the habits of its prey.
So the captive lion is dull. It's safe, but it's dull. And the wild lion is alive.
And the overarching argument here is that modernity is essentially a grand conspiracy to turn all of us into captive lions. We are constantly trying to squeeze every single drop of variability and randomness out of our daily lives.
We actively seek it out. We want the steady paycheck. We want the utterly predictable commute. We want our leisure time scheduled and curated. We happily trade our sharpness for a perceived sense of safety.
The source mentions the archetype of the empty suit CEO. The person whose life is so heavily structured that even their fun feels like an obligation. There's a great line in there, squash between 4 and 5.
Squash between 4 and 5. It's tragic, really. It's what the author calls a fake and ineffective life. Because by aggressively removing randomness, you actually create hidden fragility.
Right. If that CEO loses his meticulously planned schedule, or if the corporate script changes overnight, he is totally lost. He has zero street fighting skills. He only has gym muscles.
If you dropped him in the Serengeti or, the economic equivalent of a sudden market crash, he wouldn't last 5 minutes.
And think about how profoundly boring that life is. Squash between 4 and 5, it turns play into a chore. It turns a human life into a laminated checklist.
That brings us back to the touristification aspect. Because when you travel as a tourist, you bring the ludic domain with you. You have a strict itinerary. You see the specific sites the guidebook tells you to see. You eat at the restaurant with the most reviews.
You are effectively watching a movie of a city rather than actually living in it. You are safe from getting lost, but you are completely separated from the reality of the place.
So if we don't want to be the captive lion and we don't want to be the empty suit, what is the actual alternative? How do we live? The source introduces a really specific French term here, the flâneur.
The flâneur. It's a beautiful concept. Historically, it referred to a certain literary type in 19th century Paris, a gentleman stroller, someone who walked the city streets without any specific destination, just deeply observing, taking the life of the city in.
But in the context of this text, it means something much more specific about how we should approach learning and living. It's not just about walking around aimlessly.
No, it's definitely not about laziness. The flâneur is positioned as the exact opposite of the tourist. Where the tourist clings to the ludic domain in the map, the flâneur completely embraces the ecological domain.
They embrace the mess.
Yes. The flâneur is opportunistic. They are highly rational. They aren't just stumbling around blindly. But they are aimless in the sense that they refuse to lock themselves into a fixed destination.
They wander.
They wander deliberately. If they see an interesting unmarked alleyway, they turn down it. If they bump into an interesting stranger, they stop and have a conversation. They constantly modify their path based on the immediate feedback the environment gives them.
They are essentially running a continuous low-risk trial and error process. They're constantly filtering reality for high-value information, but they accept that they can't know in advance what that information will look like.
They're comfortable with disorder. In fact, they require it.
And that is where the real treasure is found. The source prescribes this Flanner mindset as the ultimate cure for our modern nerdiness. We need to detouristify our lives. We need a bit of mess. We need unstructured adventures.
We need uncertainty, because that is literally the only way to discover things that aren't already written in the brochure. If you only ever go where the map tells you to go, you will only ever know what everyone else already knows.
That perfectly transitions us to the next part of the source material. This idea of detouristifying leads into a surprisingly personal story from the author, Nassim Taleb. He talks about his own background and this inherent paradox of the intelligent student.
Yes, the tale of Naguib Taleb, the author's father.
And it starts with a linguistic pun that I think just perfectly encapsulates this whole tension we're discussing.
It's a great little detail. In Arabic, the phrase for intelligent student is Taleb Naguib, and his father's actual name was Naguib Taleb.
So he was literally known as the intelligent student intelligent.
That is an immense amount of pressure to live up to.
Seriously, that's like being named Winner McWinner.
It is. And the thing is, he actually lived up to it, at least on paper. He was a national valedictorian. He attended an incredibly elite Jesuit school. He scored the highest exit exam grades in the entire country.
He was the ultimate gym rat of the education system. He mastered the ludic domain flawlessly.
But here is the massive twist in the story. And this is the part that I found so incredibly fascinating. Having this perfect student for a father actually completely cured the author of respecting school.
Which is wild. You would think the father would be relentlessly pushing the son to follow in his exact footsteps. Study hard, get the straight A's, go to the elite school, be like me.
It's a really fascinating psychological dynamic. The father, despite being the absolute pinnacle product of this elite system, didn't seem to genuinely value it for his own son. He specifically didn't send the author to that same elite Jesuit school. He said he wanted to spare him.
Spare him from what? What did the father actually see? What did he realize about his own ludic success?
He saw the inherent blindness of pure academic intelligence. And this is a critical point in our deep dive. Culturally, we universally assume good grades are a positive signal. Oh, she got an A in calculus. She is brilliant. The source aggressively argues that good grades can actually be a negative signal.
A negative signal. That feels almost... it feels blasphemous to say out loud. How on earth can being good at school be a bad sign?
Because getting consistently top grades requires a very specific, submissive type of compliance. It requires you to implicitly accept the questions exactly as they are posed by authority. It requires you to color inside the lines perfectly.
You have to accept the premise of the game without challenging it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It requires you to operate flawlessly within boxes that someone else constructed. The source calls it a deep intellectual sacrifice.
To truly be the top student, you have to be willing to drastically narrow your vision to fit the prescribed curriculum.
You essentially have to wear blinders. You have to actively shut off the part of your brain that asks, wait, is this even the right question to be asking? And just dutifully calculate the answer. Exactly. And the author's father observed that his own peers, the other intelligent students, the other national valedictorians, the guys at the absolute top of the class, they suffered massively from this blindness later in life.
They couldn't adapt.
They couldn't understand anything outside the narrow scope of a curriculum. They were exceptionally brilliant at solving complex puzzles that someone else designed, but they were utterly terrible at looking around and figuring out what puzzle they were actually in.
The source gives a brilliant example of this from the trading room floor, because the author worked as a trader for years, which is definitively a chaotic street fight environment.
It is the ultimate ecological domain. The financial market is cruel. It's totally random. It doesn't care if you went to Harvard. It doesn't care about your GPA.
And the author noticed a really distinct pattern when he had to hire people for the trading desk. The job required a very bizarre specific skill. The ability to hang around.
Hanging around. It sounds so simple, right? It sounds like what teenagers do at the mall.
It sounds incredibly easy.
It sounds easy, but it is psychologically brutal for a highly conditioned overachiever. Hanging around in the context of a trading floor means waiting. It means doing absolutely nothing. It means sitting there patiently while immense ambiguity slowly resolves itself.
Waiting for the predator to strike, or the rare opportunity to show itself.
It's exactly like a hunter waiting quietly in the woods. You have to be incredibly comfortable with fuzziness.
And the studious people, the straight-A students, They failed this test.
They failed it miserably. The people who were deeply conditioned to expect clear tasks, read Chapter 4, solve these 10 equations, write a 5-page report, they completely panicked in the empty space. They needed a script.
They literally couldn't just be in the uncertainty.
No. They would get restless. They would try to invent work where there was none. They would overtrade, make up elaborate flawed theories, or just have a total nervous breakdown.
They were gym rats trying to meditate in a jungle. They were desperately looking for the rep counter on the machine, but there was no machine.
That's exactly it. And meanwhile, looking back at the father's old classmates who were the ones who actually succeeded in the wild, it wasn't the valedictorians. It wasn't the intelligent students.
No, it was the bad students, the ones who maybe barely scraped by.
The student at the very, very bottom of the class became a massively successful self-made merchant who owned a huge yacht. Another chronically low performer made an absolute fortune trading wood in Africa and then smoothly transitioned into national politics.
Because they weren't constrained by the map. They were forced from day one to figure out the actual territory.
Think about it from their perspective. If you are terrible at school, you learn very quickly that you cannot rely on the system to save you. You can't rely on the gold star or the A to automatically get you the good job. You have to learn how to hustle.
You have to learn how to read actual people, not just textbooks.
You have to learn how to negotiate. You have to deal with constant disorder and rejection. And that early training, that raw street fight training, proved to be infinitely more valuable in the open ecological market than the ability to perfectly pass a French baccalaureate exam.
So the valedictorians were ultimately fragile. They absolutely needed the rigid system to function. The bad students were anti-fragile. They could adapt and function anywhere.
That is the core takeaway of that section. The negative signal of good grades is that it heavily implies you are far too comfortable in the gym.
Okay, so if we accept this premise, if we accept that school is largely a trap, or at least a gym that completely fails to train us for the street, what do we actually do about it? Because we can't all just drop out of high school and go sell wood in Africa. That's not practical advice for the average person.
No, it's not.
But the source does propose a very specific, actionable strategy. It's the path of the autodidact.
And not just any autodidact, specifically the barbell autodidact.
Okay, let's unpack this barbell strategy, because this is a classic recurring concept in the author's work. If you picture a physical barbell, it has heavy weights on the two extreme ends and absolutely nothing in the middle.
Right. So taking that concept from finance, a barbell strategy means you play it extremely, hyper-conservatively safe with the vast majority of your assets, like holding cash or treasury bonds, and then you take extreme, highly speculative risks with a tiny sliver of your portfolio.
You completely avoid the middle. You avoid that moderate risk stuff that can unexpectedly blow up but doesn't actually offer life-changing returns.
Exactly. You barbell the risk.
So how on earth does this apply to education? How do you barbell your own learning?
The author applied it to his own life like this. On one end of the barbell, the hyper-safe side, he did the absolute bare minimum necessary for school. He attended just enough classes to avoid flunking out. He studied exactly enough to pass the exams.
Safety. He was keeping his parents happy. He was keeping the bureaucratic system off his back. He was avoiding the F, but he absolutely wasn't grinding for the A.
Exactly. He put zero internal expectation on the school system for his actual intellectual development. He treated school like a mundane bureaucratic requirement, like going to the DMV to renew your driver's license.
Right. You don't try to get a high score on your license renewal. You just get the paperwork done and leave.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's the safe side of the barbell.
And the other side, the high-risk, high-reward side.
Voracious, unbridled, totally chaotic rooting. He used all the spare time he saved by intentionally not over-studying for his classes, and he used it to read massive piles of books. He treated his own personal self-directed education as the high-risk, high-reward venture.
The goal was to become a person of knowledge rather than a swallower.
That's the specific Lebanese dialect term he references, a swallower. It refers to a student who just blindly swallows the curriculum whole without chewing. The barbell strategy allowed him to completely avoid swallowing. He controlled his own intellectual intake. He heavily curated his own diet.
And he had a very specific, highly unorthodox method for how he read these books. I think this is something listeners can apply to their lives immediately. It's incredibly liberatory. He calls it the anti-boredom rule.
This is literally the secret to how he could read 30 to 60 hours a week without completely burning out. The cardinal rule is, The enterprise must remain effortless.
Effortless. I mean, reading heavy 19th century philosophy or massive Russian literature doesn't exactly sound effortless. It sounds like hard work.
It is effortless, if and only if you are driven purely by natural curiosity and not forced discipline. His rule was incredibly strict. The exact moment a book becomes boring, you put it down,
Right.
and you immediately pick up another one.
You do not push through.
Never push through. Pushing through is gym thinking. It's the no pain, no gain mentality.
Okay.
And while that might work for building physical muscles, it actively kills intellectual curiosity. In the library, if you are experiencing pain or boredom, it means you are wasting your time. If you get bored with a text, it just means your brain isn't currently latching onto the pattern. Maybe it's not the right time in your life for that book, or maybe the author's just a bad writer, or the translation is poor. So he would just ruthlessly jump from book to book.
So he never gave up on the act of reading. He just gave up on the specific book.
That is the crucial distinction that most people miss. Most people, when they get bogged down in a difficult or boring book, they feel immense guilt. They think, I started it, so I should finish it.
I do that all the time.
We all do. And because they dread picking that specific book back up, they stop reading entirely for weeks or months. They internally conclude, I guess I'm just not a big reader. He bypassed all that guilt. He just thought, this author is boring me, tossed it aside, and moved on.
This perfectly mimics rational trial and error research.
It's the flunner method applied directly to the library. You wander rapidly through the stacks until you strike gold.
And what kind of books did he actually read during the 60-hour binges? The source says he curated what he calls an anti-curriculum.
He specifically, intentionally read what was not on the school program. If the school explicitly assigned it, he aggressively avoided it.
That sounds incredibly rebellious. Is it just him being contrarian for the sake of it?
No, it's highly strategic. Think about basic supply and demand. If literally everyone reads the exact same school books, then everyone possesses the exact same knowledge base. Everyone operates on the exact same mental map.
To have an actual edge, to find the real treasure, you have to go where the crowd isn't looking.
Exactly. So he deliberately avoided the classic bores, like Racine and Corneille, specifically because they were universally prescribed by the French school system. Instead, he dove headfirst into the profound, messy stuff. The Russians, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, Chekhov.
The heavy hitters. The books that deal with the chaotic, unquantifiable human soul.
But he also did these insane, obsessive sprints. He mentions doing a sprint where he read 20 Émile Zola novels in exactly 20 days. Can you imagine that level of immersion? Just mentally living in 19th century France for 3 weeks straight.
And then later, when he moved to the United States, he immediately bought hundreds of books in English. Trollope, Burke, Macaulay. Just continuously consuming massive amounts of raw, unfiltered data, but entirely on his own terms.
And doing this creates a highly unique type of mind. A mind that can draw novel connections that literally no one else can see, simply because no one else has that highly specific combination of inputs. The swallowers all share the exact same mass-produced map. The autodidact has a totally unique, hand-drawn map of the territory.
This finally brings us to the big payoff, because it's a fair question to ask. Does this actually work? It sounds romantic in theory to just read whatever you want and wander around, but does it translate to tangible success? The source answers this by describing a major epiphany the author had while he was studying at the Wharton Business School.
This is the critical finding the treasure moment in the narrative. He's at Wharton, which is arguably one of the most prestigious business schools in the entire world. It is the absolute high temple of the ludic domain. And while he's there, he realizes his true passion is specializing in probability and rare events.
Which, of course, is what he is globally famous for now.
Yeah.
The black swan theory, anti-fragile, all of that foundational work starts right here.
Right. But as he starts attending these highly advanced statistics and finance classes, he starts smelling a rat.
What was the rat? What did he notice?
He noticed that these world-renowned professors were casually brushing away the glaring flaws in their statistical models. They would proudly present a perfect bell curve, the standard normal distribution, and inevitably there would be historical data points that wildly deviated from the curve. The extreme events, the massive market crashes, the sudden booms.
And how did the professors handle that?
They would just dismiss them as outliers. They say, oh, don't worry about those rare anomalies. The mathematical model works perfectly for 99% of normal cases.
But wait, in the ecological domain, in the actual financial markets, that 1% anomaly is where you either make a fortune or lose absolutely everything. That is the street fight.
Exactly. He realized that all the actual meat was hidden inside what the professors were actively ignoring. He realized that these complex Six Sigma calculations, the standard formulas they used for predicting very rare events, were a complete intellectual fraud.
They were just mathematically sophisticated nonsense.
Yes, they were desperately trying to force the terrifying chaos of the global market into the neat, predictable lines of a gym machine.
But at the time, he couldn't mathematically prove it yet. He didn't have the deep mathematical chops to stand up and debate these elite professors. He admits he was getting smoked by the quant nerds in the classroom.
So what did he do? He didn't go hire a Wharton tutor. He didn't sign up for another structured course. He applied his Flannery method. He went straight to the bookstore and custom ordered every single book they could find that had the word probability or stochastic in the title.
Every single book.
Every book. Heavy academic textbooks, obscure theoretical monographs, translated research papers. He brought them all home, piled them up, and read them in bed. And he jumped relentlessly between them. If he got stuck trying to understand a complex theorem in one textbook, he wouldn't bang his head against the wall. He'd just grab another book to see if a different author explained it better.
He completely bypassed the priests of the classroom and went straight to the raw source texts.
And because he was learning this outside the gym, completely unconstrained by a syllabus, he was able to clearly see the fatal limits that the gym instructors were hiding.
He realized that real uncertainty wasn't at all what they taught in school. School teaches uncertainty like it's a casino game, where the odds are known and the rules are fixed.
But real uncertainty is messy. It's wild. It has what he calls fat tails. And because he acquired this knowledge through genuine self-discovery, he wasn't ideologically brainwashed. He explicitly says in the text, had I studied the subject by prepackaged means, I would be now brainwashed into thinking that uncertainty was something to be found in a casino.
He actually found the real treasure precisely because he decided to dig in the exact spot where the official map said, "Here be dragons."
There is a fantastic quote he shares in this section from a famous speculator he met in the 1980s, a hugely, massively successful guy. He told the author, "Much of what other people know isn't worth knowing."
Much of what other people know isn't worth knowing. That sounds so arrogant at first, but it is actually profoundly true in this context.
It is the ultimate credo of the successful contrarian. If literally everyone already knows it, if it's in the standard textbook, it's already priced into the market. It is structurally of zero competitive value. The true value is always hidden in the secret knowledge. The hard-won knowledge you only get from surviving the street fight or from wandering into the dusty corner of the library that no one else ever visits.
The source ends this entire exploration by making a final, sharp distinction between what it calls non-nerdy applied mathematics and the standard school approach.
And this serves as the final nail in the coffin of the gym mentality. The school approach is fundamentally backward, it says. Study an abstract theorem in a sterile vacuum. Memorize the tool. And then, once you graduate, go out into the world and try desperately to find a piece of reality that perfectly resembles the artificial example in your textbook.
And if reality refuses to fit the model, well, try to force it. It's the classic guy with the hammer wandering around looking for a nail.
Exactly. The non-nerdy approach is the exact reverse. You find a problem first. A real, messy, bleeding street fight problem. And then, driven by absolute necessity, you go out and find the math that solves it. Even if you have to invent the math yourself or awkwardly stitch it together from 3 different unrelated books.
You learn to use the tool purely because you desperately need to build the house, not because you just love collecting shiny tools in a vacuum.
That's precisely it. It's exactly how humans naturally acquire language. A baby learns the words mama and hungry because they have an urgent ecological problem. They need food and they need comfort. They absolutely do not study the abstract grammar of the noun case before they attempt to speak. School gets the natural order of learning entirely backward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to synthesize all of this. We started with the visual of the bodybuilder who gets crushed by the street fighter. We moved through the dangers of soccer moms and the tragedy of captive lions. We explored the severe limitations of the intelligent student. And we highlighted the raw power of the autodidactic flaneur.
And it all beautifully circles back to an ancient observation. The source brings up a quote from Seneca, the Roman philosopher, non scholae sed vitae decimus, which translates to, we do not study for life, but only for the lecture room.
Seneca saw this happening 2,000 years ago.
He absolutely did. He saw, even back then, that educational institutions have this inevitable tendency to become closed, self-referential loops. You learn the material simply to pass the test, to get the credential, to eventually teach the class, to give the exact same test.
And the source points out this incredibly ironic detail. Many prestigious U.S. colleges have actually adopted a corrupted version of this motto. They flip it to non scholae sed vitae. We study for life, not for school. But the source insists they are essentially lying.
They are lying. They are enthusiastically selling expensive gym memberships while falsely promising they are preparing you for a street fight.
So what is the ultimate call to action here? For you, the listener, whether you're driving your car right now or sitting at your desk in your own corporate gym.
The call to action is to rigorously audit your own sources of competence. Ask yourself, are you relying entirely on gym machines? Are your primary skills only applicable in environments that have clear rules and predefined outcomes?
Because if they are, you are highly fragile.
You are. The practical advice is to actively adopt the barbell strategy in your own professional and personal life. Look, you don't have to quit your job today and become a nomad. Do the necessary minimum to satisfy the system. Be a competent, reliable employee. But fiercely protect your real energy, your genuine curiosity for the ecological domain. Read weird, unfiltered books. Talk to eccentric people far outside your industry. Wander without a map. Be a flaneurer.
Don't let the curriculum swallow you.
Exactly. The real treasure is never in the center of the map. It's always furthest away from the center. It's in the tails of the distribution. It's out there in the disorder.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We talked about the muscle-bound bodybuilder being completely unable to lift the irregular stone. Ask yourself this. If you were suddenly taken entirely out of your current highly structured environment today, if someone took away your job title, your support team, your software, your daily routine, and you were dropped naked into a chaotic, undefined problem with absolutely no clear instructions, would your skills actually hold up? Or would you be the bodybuilder desperately looking for the perfectly knurled handle on a rock that simply doesn't have one?
That's the ultimate question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Go out there and find some disorder.
Stay anti-fragile.